to another episode of Massalia Tales. In the previous episode, Cretheus faced a sally battle against the Parthivans at Selucia, who came out with a big advantage on the balance bar, but Cretheus had the advantage of formation. His big Macedonian-style phalanx held off the enemy, while his cavalry destroyed them from behind, despite some troubles with the enemy's horse archers. In Bosphorus, Eusebius finally retired as general of the Daemons, of Polymus being replaced by his protege, Artemios. In Britannia, Heraclides was able to take out the Daemonian army defending their settlement, meaning it's now ours, leaving only a few forces still surviving in the field. Most of those forces came in for a suicidal attack and were defeated by Heraclides in defense of the town, although his army was in bad condition, and he was able to finish them off. Cretheus was able to take Selucia, having defeated most of the garrison. However, they had another stack just outside the town that we needed to deal with. Meanwhile, Artemios was heading through the steppes looking for a battle for his forces to clear the way for Arche Bosphorus. The Parthian army at Selucia laid siege to Cretheus, and he was forced to sally out with a massive disadvantage to try and break it because there's no chance of him getting any support. Let's continue. There were few cultures willing or able to make a successful war against Massalia, meaning that as the century came to an end, they could assert their own power without consequence. Most of the world was signed on for one-sided trade deals, and those that refused were left watching the horizon for approaching banners. It was a stability enforced by financial means. The large powers of the Mediterranean were all becoming rich from each other's presence. And with all the powers roughly balanced militarily, the scales would only be truly upset if one was to become more ambitious than the others. Only the Massalians and the Ptolemaics, at opposite ends of the sea, were showing signs that an increase in strength was their objective. Cretheus forms up, ready to face this forced battle against the Parthian forces. He's got his army in a standard formation, skirmishers in front, massive pike line in the centre, with hoplites on the flanks, peltasts and the giant ballista behind, ready to provide ranged support. The enemy army started shifting, going downhill on the battle map. My ballista started firing at it, in particular at their general who was exposed. I decided I'd try and move up the hill, moving in an opposite direction to them, but actually at the last second they turned around and then ran really fast towards me, catching me slightly off guard coming through the forest. So I had to stop and form up in a slightly less than useful location, right on the edge of the forest where the enemy will have cover for their archers. But my archers will do their best to fire back and try and take them out. So we're now going to try and receive the enemy as they charge. They're coming in with lots of different units, mostly heavy spears. You can see they start their attack on my left side with these mercenary spears. All the places where they're just running into my pike phalanx, that should be fine. Interestingly, you can see they've got hoplites of their own coming in there near the centre. The main threat right now is the enemy's archers, of which they have quite a lot. Those archers will do a lot of damage to the pike phalanx if they get sustained fire on it. The phalanx is particularly weak against that. Some good news is that the enemy's general appears to have made a suicide attack against my pikes. He's going to stop, unfortunately. He doesn't really get himself killed. His units are actually so heavy that pikes aren't really even able to kill them, despite being an ideal thing for taking on cavalry. You can see the arrows there raining down into the pike phalanx, not killing anyone yet because the health of the men is still high enough to resist arrow fire, but that's going to change soon enough. They're making a very heavy attack here on the left flank, including those hoplite troops who we saw using Greek-style shields for some reason, while the rest of their comrades are using bigger Thuros shields. My cavalry are going to start a rear attack, and we really need to do this because the enemy's archers actually switched targets, started firing not at the pike phalanx, thus avoiding friendly fire, but at the peltasts behind, and this was annoying because the peltasts are the guys I'm relying on to get loads of the kills. So, I need to get cavalry back there to attack them, and I've done just that here, sending 2 units of cav to drive off this unit of enemy archers here. But unfortunately for me, this plan had to be cut short because the enemy's general came out of combat and came back to actually fight with these cavalry, and this is disastrous because his cavalry will very easily destroy any of my cavalry units being superior, so I had to just get out of there and leave the rest of the archers to continue their reign of terror. Meanwhile, on the other flank, I was trying to do the same thing, but I was being harassed by this unit of swordsmen. They just kept chasing my cavalry. They're getting some kills with their javelins. That meant I had to keep micromanaging that cavalry to make sure those swords were never getting too close. Since I have lots of energy at the start, it's going to be easy to outrun them, but it'll get harder and harder as the battle goes on. My other cavalry have also attracted the attention of these very Greek-looking units, even using hoplite armour there. They're very inspired by the Greeks, it seems, this army. So they, again, are going to have to be micromanaged to avoid taking damage. The pelters in the centre are going to have to just keep taking that arrow fire then, because we can't get rid of those archers. A few of them still have ammo and are throwing over the top at the enemy. This main fight is going okay. The pike phalanx is holding well. It is fighting slightly uphill, but it's still relatively okay. The enemy aren't really breaking through the formation. The enemy's general here, I've managed to lure him back behind my line, and the only unit I really have that can defeat him right now is Cretheus himself with his own heavy cavalry. So we're going to basically entrap the enemy's general and guards. First my lighter cav, draw them back, and then you can see we surround them so that we can attack on three sides, with Cretheus leading the attack from behind where his heavy troops will do the most damage. The enemy general's morale starts to drop at this point. For some reason, you can see they're forming a cavalry wedge, but they're unable to actually do it because they're under attack. So now I can surround them with all of those cavalry and make an attack. The enemy have a decent chance of killing my lighter troops, but I'm hoping that my superior numbers will win out there. Meanwhile, back behind the enemy's line, the cavalry that finally escaped from the enemy's swordsmen have made an attack on the enemy's archers. They're really struggling though to actually kill them. The archers are fighting really well in melee. They seem to be quite decent, especially against shot cav. And here, the enemy's swordsmen unfortunately now catch up, so the party's over. We're going to have to leave those archers to continue fighting. Didn't even manage to rout them. We have, though, routed the enemy's general and guards here. Cretheus and the light cav chasing them off for now, but they'll need to come back to the battle to keep fighting. With them going, we can see the first routes occurring, or nearly occurring here, on the main line. The enemy's archers have switched their target again to fire even further back, this time targeting my archers. Also annoying because my archers were raining fire on the enemy's heavy infantry and doing damage, so the enemy is using their archers very effectively to take away my advantages. You can see here on the left flank, the enemy putting so much pressure on my little flank echelon of hoplites there. The hoplite is actually being ground down and losing troops quite rapidly. So are certain parts of the phalanx. Here you can see this unengaged part of the phalanx has attracted some enemy archer fire, arrows raining down and taking them out. And I can't really do anything to stop them right now. The phalanx can't move because part of it is engaged on its edges. So the enemy can just keep firing at the centre of it with these archers who have moved in quite close now. Going to be able to get some accurate and powerful fire on my units. So the phalanx is thinning out, and the thinner it gets, the less able it will be to withstand further infantry attacks. So we've got big, weighty fight going on both flanks, but luckily on the left flank here, my returning cavalry, having defeated the enemy's general, were able to rear attack some of the enemy's lower quality spear units, and that causes a chain rout in that area. And when the rout begins, I release the dogs, so I'd snuck through the forest to be behind the enemy's lines. So the dogs will now come in at a perfect angle to take out these routing soldiers and try and force them to shatter so that they don't come back. That will mean my left flank will be freed up and I can start folding it around to fight on the right, where the enemy right now have a huge advantage, so we definitely need to do something like that. Cretheus himself is going to lead the cavalry to now again try and drive the enemy's archers away, somewhat more successfully this time, hoping to clear a gap for the rest of our units, clear some space in the air for them to maneuver without being constantly hit by arrows. My other cavalry are still running away from those sword units. We haven't killed a single one of the swordsmen, and our men are getting exhausted, but I'm now going to try and draw them into a little trap. They won't break. It's not even possible. It's one of those little tricks of war. Men fight hardest when there is no choice. Anyone who runs here runs either into the hands of the enemy or back into the cage behind us. The cage already stinking of corpses. These men will fight or they will die. And knowing this, they fight twice as hard out of contempt for their fortunes in the afterlife. Don't you feel the same draw? Even I will die if the enemy are not defeated, and it makes my blood boil. In this battle, a single move, a single cut will decide the lives of thousands. It will be up to we to deliver that cut. Just as Alexander led his riders to seize victory, I will personally take shame for every Massalian I do not save. Ride with me now. It is time. Those eastern hoplites have come in to engage with my pike phalanx, but are now going to be outflanked. Because my left flank has freed up, I can fold the pike phalanx around the enemy's square unit and engage it on two fronts, which should be handy. Cretheus and the cavalry are still driving against the enemy's archers, trying to get rid of them, and my trap against those swordsmen who are pursuing my other cavalry has now sprung. It's basically just using 3 units of pelters to attack this unit on multiple sides to trap them. This allows my cavalry to finally go and do whatever they want. The downside to this plan, as we'll see, is that the pelters aren't very good in melee whilst the enemy are. Now Cretheus, while engaging with the enemy's archers, seems to have encountered a problem. These archers have spawned a whole bunch of long spears and have suddenly turned into an anti-cavalry unit at the last minute, so now he's in trouble. Of course, while playing I didn't really notice this, so it'll take a while for me to realise and get him out of that engagement. Luckily, he survived. I wouldn't have been too surprised if he died there, because a lot of his guards are already dead at this point. At the main engagement, I'm still trying to surround the enemy with the units freed up from the left flank. The problem is so many of my units were dead on the left flank, and I don't really have much of a force to hammer the enemy with. We're just hitting with these tiny lines of hoplites, barely making a dent in the enemy's massive formation. Here's that pike phalanx engaging on two sides. The little corner there being the most dangerous situation to be in, being attacked from two sides at once for the enemy. The enemy's morale dropping, but they're still fighting on, and our men aren't really killing any of them. Our archers have been ground down by the enemy's archers at this point. There are very few archers remaining, but in some ways I'm grateful the enemy wasn't firing at my heavy infantry, because they would have broken quite rapidly if the enemy had focused on them. Now back with those pelters, we've got the enemy swordsmen now totally surrounded, but we're pretty much not killing any of them. The enemy are just killing my pelters. So I've got Cretheus in there trying to inspire the troops. It's not going to make a difference. These pelters are very soon going to be defeated in that engagement, which is not going to help out. Enemy spearmen coming back from routing as well, disrupting my cavalry maneuvers, which isn't too helpful. I've got these archers out of ammo to just draw their daggers and rush out to the flank to try and drive away the enemy's archers now. The archers probably could beat me if they stayed and fought my archers in melee, but luckily they're skirmishing, so we can do that and just play with the enemy, stop them from actually stopping and firing their bows at any point. A couple of cavalry units, half-dead cavalry units, managed to finally rout an archer unit way out in the back here, so that is something at least. The main fight now getting a little bit dodgy as the enemy actually on the left flank are starting to counter-surround me. They've also got their units coming back from routing, chasing off my cavalry on the left here. You can see my pike phalanx has been rotated. I'm not sure if the enemy's Greek hoplite style unit fell back and re-engaged or my unit glitched out, but they're now fighting on the flanks of my phalanx, not ideal. Here where they are fighting on the front of the phalanx, the only problem is that the phalanx is almost totally broken. We've got barely any troops left. So they're not really in formation anymore, meaning the enemy are going to come into close melee more often where they'll have the advantage. And here you can see thorax hoplites, barely any of us left alive. Lots of the enemy dead as well though. Those guys have been going blow for blow with the enemy. The enemy are losing just as many troops as us, but of course the enemy are in a position to reinforce. Well, we aren't, so we need to win with enough troops left over to hold out. So far, it's not looking ideal. The balance bar has gone slightly further in our favour than it was at the beginning of the battle, but the enemy still have the advantage. Out here in the forest, my dog handlers are being chased off by some enemy spearmen. Luckily, I could use my ballistas to fire rocks at those spears, and they actually shattered at that point, so the dog handlers were saved from having to fight in melee against an actual melee unit. Very handy to have that artillery available for such purposes. So the plan with the pelters has officially failed. We've lost 2 units of pelters entirely, and we've got a couple of men left in the final unit, and those swordsmen, still pretty much at full strength, resume their plan to just chase my cavalry around. Very annoying. Luckily other units of cavalry have made a successful attack on some of the enemy's melee infantry here at the line, trying to do cycle charges, but with so few troops left, they're not really making a massive impact. They will still inflict big morale shocks though, even with a few troops. Against those hoplite style units, I've got my archers fighting melee at the back to stop the enemy's morale from getting too high. Obviously they're not going to do any actual damage to the unit, and the pikemen fighting on the front aren't really damaging it either. We're going to try and defeat that unit using morale. Cretheus is coming in and using his rally ability to keep morale up, as all across my army, numbers are getting really low. A lot of troops in the red. Things could turn into a chain rout at any moment on my side. I'm just hoping the same is true for the enemy, because they've taken tons of losses as well. The morale still decent, they still have the advantage, but it's possible that taking out one key unit could still chain rout the enemy before they can do the same to us. We have the cavalry advantage still though, we can maneuver around. Here you can see I drew away a unit of enemy spears from the fight. Unfortunately now they're turning back, but they're going to waste time running across the battlefield doing that, so that's quite handy. Those enemy pursuing swords still continuing their old game. We're just going to keep ignoring them for now, because we need to hit things with these cavalry, including those archers who were being chased back and forth by my archers, as you'll remember. And now a cavalry attack on the right flank finally breaks that big enemy unit that was fighting right on the edge, and a nearby similar enemy unit, now being surrounded by my forces, starts to lose morale as well, despite having the big numerical advantage in the local fight. So this is where the battlefield is starting to turn into our advantage. The balance bar now even. Our few surviving forces here still fighting on the flanks with all my pike phalanx against this enemy hoplite phalanx, but one other phalanx fighting properly and slightly outflanking the enemy with archers and other pikemen. Those men are going to lose hope, even though we can't actually kill any of them, because the rest of their army is being destroyed. Those pursuing swords finally engaged by an actual melee unit here. The survivors of my hoplites, barely any of the unit alive, but still going. I would have thought they were routed by now, are miraculously still fighting against this full enemy unit, able to stop them from going and doing any damage to my actual softer units, and the archers there being used once again to chase enemy archers off. At this point, the enemy finally just chain routes out of exhaustion. We can start slaughtering a few of these fuller enemy units as they escape to minimize the enemy's numbers. Overall, massive losses on both sides in this battle. A costly victory is declared, and we'll see on the results screen on the campaign map it turned into a Pyrrhic victory. The battlefield absolutely covered in bodies from both sides, but importantly, Cretheus has lifted the siege, so if there are no reinforcements for the Parthivans now, he'll be able to start replenishing forces since we do own Selucia, and perhaps get his army back to strength, although a lot of the experience in his army has now been lost.
How many? No, the number does not matter. This was not an army of Ptolemy, not of any normal Yavanna, but an army of great Iskander himself. It is true! Does the legend not say it came with few men, armed with long spears and trained like dancers to move as one on the battlefield? And with strange foreign cavalry that hammered the hearts of men already entangled in their pikes? Ask any man who escaped that field, this is what we saw. Just as the old masters of Persia were defeated by Iskander, again a Yavanna invader comes to test us. We must make ready men with the metal to defeat such a foe, or make ready the gifts with which we shall buy peace with this conqueror.
Let's take a closer look at the results then. We know we're going to have heavy casualties on our side, but the enemy should have fared just as badly, by my own estimations in the battle. We'll see it comes up here saying it's a Pyrrhic victory now, big losses for Cretheus, but no units completely destroyed, which is quite important, meaning all of them will be able to replenish. For the enemy, the same is not true. Loads of their units completely destroyed. They'll be in trouble, just a few survivors will escape, and Cretheus is going to make sure that's the case by killing the captives that he took after the battle. So, we have resolved the siege of Selucia. That means we can now start replenishing the army, and it desperately needs it. Replenishment isn't all that fast, giving the enemy many turns to come back with new forces to besiege him, which would stop replenishment, which is not ideal. It's basically going to be up to the Parthivans to take the initiative on this, realise they should attack now if they do have more forces, which of course we don't know that they do, so we might be okay. Artemios, back up here in the steppes, is going to continue his little march towards the Cattyroy's position, a strong position with a powerful army that is sort of composed in a way that will defeat his. It also has a powerful garrison backing it up, making an attack almost impossible. The best we can hope for is for them to come out and attack us in a fortified position. So I'm going to start a fort here and hope that Arche Bosphorus will come and reinforce my position. That's what I hope. You can see there are some horse archers available as mercenaries. I thought I might have to bring those guys in to combat the enemy's horse archers. We'll see. Now moving on, Bithynia comes to me with an offer. They want me to join a war against a faction I wasn't familiar with. They are a Hellenistic faction allied to me and the Egyptians, and they're only really at war with these guys. This is the nomadic faction that's right on the edge of the map. Haven't really had any interaction with them or seen any of their agents or forces at work, so I didn't really know why these guys are even at war with the Bithynia. But I decided I would join that war out of support for a fellow Hellenistic state and see if anything comes of it. I thought probably nothing's going to happen in that war, considering we've never even seen them anywhere. The Parthian forces completely abandoned Selucia, falling back, no new forces arrive, which suggests to me they don't really have anything else, which is perfect there for Cretheus. Now you can see I got a message saying war target invalidated. I had told Arche Bosphorus to move north and take that settlement. I thought maybe someone else had taken it and that's why it was invalidated, but it's actually invalidated because it was successful, a slightly misleading message there. So finally Arche Bosphorus have started their campaign to retake their territory. I'm going to need to give them a new war target now to tell them to come around and fight the big army standing in front of Artemios. Ideally we want them to fight the army at the same time as us, so for us to just sit in reinforcement range, hit the end turn button and have the enemy make their attack, because their turn I believe does come before the Cattyroy, I can't actually remember. Anyway, back down in Selucia, Cretheus is now free there aren't going to be any more Parthivans as far as we can tell, so he can just sit here and know he can peacefully replenish his forces. To make things faster, Cretheus is going to use some conscription. I can level him up to be a conscriptor. This massively increases the speed at which he'll be replenishing, so very soon he'll actually be back to full strength. The Catioroi forces run away from their position there. They move south and seem to attack the Sakarauka on the settlement on the edge of the Crimea there. Not 100% sure what they're doing, but it's very interesting, of course, because it means the settlement is unguarded. I couldn't resist Artemios just moving forward and having a little look at the strength here. The enemy has an advantage, apparently. Even their garrison army is better than the Daemons of Polemus. It seems the garrisons are very powerful around here. And of course I don't actually want to make the attack, because we want Arche Bosphorus to be leading the attack so that they can take the place. So I'm just going to fall back for now. Plus of course I could siege them out and try and get the enemy to sally and defeat their garrison to make it easier for Arche Bosphorus, but I didn't want to risk the enemy's main force coming back and catching me in that siege there, so I'm going to continue with my original plan. Moving on again, the Iceni come to me offering a non-aggression pact, but they want me to pay a pretty hefty fee. Actually a small fee given the amount of money I have, but I wasn't willing to pay for non-aggression. If they came to me with a more even deal, I would be more likely to take it. I'm going to use Ifyanasa now to just have a look at what the Catioroi forces are doing. We can see they're just standing on the coast. It looks like they've been damaged in the battle. I'm guessing they attacked the town, but then I noticed this Spartan army, which is also really damaged, just standing around here. A really experienced, good-looking army there, similar to Heraclides' army in Britannia, but Sparta isn't at war with any of the factions nearby, so I don't really know what Sparta's doing. It's possible they just made peace and they had been at war. I also see the Catioroi have a slave uprising in the west, so that's hopefully going to distract some of their forces during this conflict. The Egyptians have gone back to having their forces just be all over the place here in Mesopotamia. I think they're allied to Hayastan, the Armenian Empire, and they're basically just acting as Overwatch, just guarding their allied settlements because they don't have anything better to do. They're probably not involved in any major wars since they're allied to everyone just like I am. But since I'm allied to them, of course, I don't need to worry about them standing around, so I'm going to start moving out with Cretheus. The plan is to move north towards Hatra and take that small settlement from the Parthivans. I may after that be able to just make them a client state because they've been so weakened by Cretheus' attacks. There was a little bridge with a river nearby. I wanted to deploy on the other side of the bridge from the city, thinking that Parthivan forces might actually come down from the Armenian territory and attack from that direction, thinking I might have seen a few moving up there. This way they'll have to attack me across the bridge if they want to come from the south. Nothing, as far as you can imagine, in all directions. Not the most desirable of lands. But I don't see how we're serving the council by just sitting here. Sure, we're meant to be helping the Bosphorans, but isn't that a job for a greenhorn like Eurysthenes? We aren't an army that acts as support. We are the vanguard of the Massalian Republic. We should be running these tasteless nomads into the sea and making the Hellenites in the city swear to Massalia. I know this is what Eusebius wanted, but we all know he got a little soft in these past years. Too much time in the company of Athenians. Not saying I don't mind getting paid to do nothing, but it isn't why I carry this banner. And don't get me started on the new strategos. The Iceni return with another non-aggression pact, this time asking for less money than they did last time, so a little bit more acceptable, but still not really the sort of thing I'm looking for. The diplomatic relations between us aren't all that good, so there is a risk they could actually attack me. I noticed they're at war with one of my client states, the Carnutes, which isn't a good start. I offered them a plain non-aggression pact, and they rejected it, so we're going to just leave that for now and see how that develops. So Cretheus didn't meet any Parthivans, no one came to attack us as I had feared, so I think it's probably safe to continue on and move against the next Parthivan settlement. I move into their territory and again set up at a river crossing that uses half my movement points and I can't actually reach the settlement, so I thought I might as well actually just hang around on this river crossing and next time I'll be able to move on and reach the settlement itself. Now you can see here, Arche Bosphorus forces are currently moving by sea towards the Catioroi, and I wasn't really expecting this. I assumed they would go up around where Artemios is, so this means if I want to support their attack on that enemy army, I need to get around the town. But having a look, it turns out it's going to be quite difficult to get around this town. It has a huge zone of control. It means I can't go along the coast. I have to go out into those forests to the north and then come back around from the west, which wouldn't be ideal. So instead, I put the Daemons to sea. That way they can move in a couple of turns over to where the Catioroi forces are. And Arche Bosphorus will probably attack before I reach them, but I might be able to support that attack there. I can also move Evios over to help out and potentially have him land troops if Arche Bosphorus starts a fight. Now we have news here that the Daemon have formed a confederation. They've confederated together with the Ardii, the Illyrian faction that controls bits of Illyria and Italia. So together they now control all of Illyria and Italia, a pretty powerful state, luckily really friendly towards me. There's also this little client state of mine on their border, which means overall the Illyrian area is really stable. Germania and parts of Gaul used to be less stable, but actually my old enemy the Boii has already been defeated, and it's my own allies and client states that have taken all their territory, so things have increased in stability over time, which is quite fortunate. Now while I was looking here at the diplomacy map, I noticed there's Trapezoros, a little faction down here right in the corner of the Black Sea, which is Hellenic, and they were willing to be my client state in exchange for me starting to trade with them. Quite handy, so I thought I might as well take on another client state. They don't have any particularly exciting diplomacy, so I'm not going to get pulled into any wars, or the only people they're at war with are the people I'm also already at war with, so that's fine. So we'll see if Trapezoros turn out to be a useful client state in any way. At the very least, I'll be receiving a small amount of money from them as part of this deal, plus getting the trade income, which will be handy. Now moving on, the Catioroi forces fall back from their position near the Sakarauka capital, some of them moving west there, not actually defending their own city against my advance, not sure what they're doing. You can see I did have Evios there ready to join an attack, but he's not going to be needed. The Daemons are going back onto land, and Ifyanasa is going to go west and try and track the progress of the Catioroi forces. We see they haven't actually moved west along the road, they're just moving out to that peninsula, not even sure what they're doing there. For Cretheus, nothing has happened again, so it's time to move on. I wasn't sure whether there'd be Parthian forces here. Luckily enough, there's nothing, which gels with my suspicion that the Parthians don't really have anything left. Their garrison army is relatively strong, not the sort of strength we saw from the Catioroi earlier though, so nothing Cretheus won't be able to overcome. But because his army is particularly poorly suited to a siege assault, I decided to wait and just see if they would sally during the end turn sequence, because I'd prefer a field battle. They actually do the opposite. They come and offer me a peace treaty, an interesting offer. Now this is an offer which doesn't really help, because it would mean Cretheus can't continue his conquest and take these territories without declaring war on a bigger state. I noticed though here that they're willing to be my client state in exchange for a small amount of money, very small in comparison to the size of my treasury. Now that's a more interesting offer, because of course subjugating them and having them as a client state isn't too far off actually conquering the territory, you just don't have to administer it myself. The question was though, would Cretheus really benefit from this? Because I actually kind of wanted another territory in Mesopotamia, because having just one there is going to make it a little bit hard to manage, because I don't have enough building slots to use to build up the sort of province I need. So I decided I would take one more province, take Hatra, and then come back and see if they would be my client state, so I don't have to bother moving north to take their final province. Now Artemios moves up to the Catioroi city. What I'm doing here is just sitting on the edge of its zone of control so that Arche Bosphorus can attack it and I'll come in as reinforcements. That's what I'm trying to do anyway. And you see here, Artemios has a trait. He likes successes, which is spreading Hellenic cultural influence, which is particularly useful. Now back with Cretheus, the Parthians didn't make any moves, they didn't make the sally I was hoping for, or reinforcing the position or anything like that, so I'm going to have to make this siege assault unless I want to wait until the place is sieged out. But when I come here to have a little look at the balance bar has mysteriously changed. It's now really far in the enemy's favour, despite the fact the enemy has actually lost forces, losing more forces than I did due to siege attrition. I can't auto-resolve it anymore, which is what I was considering, so this is a surprising turn of events. I guess I'll just siege them out because there's only 2 turns of supplies left, rather than risk what could potentially be a dangerous battle, although I'm not sure I believe the balance bar here. We'll see how this all turns out next time. While Cretheus made war in Parthia, the reactions of the other powers of the region are notable. They did nothing. Although Cretheus had clearly stated his intentions, none of the kings and emperors in the surrounding territories seemed worried. Perhaps they did not consider his small army a threat. Or perhaps their delight at the fall of Parthia distracted them from realizing the implications for themselves. Not even the Armenian Empire, a state that controlled many of Cretheus's declared war targets, stirred. Their alliance with the Hellenist dynasty of Egypt perhaps giving them an undue affinity with the Massalians. Cretheus was flying below the radar, giving him all the space he needed to build his invasion plans.